So you may be at a point in life right now where you feel overwhelmed, like there's too much going on and it's just too hard to make it through right now. And if you are, you wouldn't be alone. There's a lot of us who are feeling that way, feeling like the water's just a little bit too high, the light's a little bit too dark, and that maybe when we look inside ourselves, there's just not quite enough inside of us to help us make it through. And you just don't feel very strong. And so over the next few days, I wanted to talk to you about ways that we can find strength in God, because God's heart for you is that you are strong. In fact, he tells us in Joshua 1:9, he says this, he says, "Be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." And so he commands us to live in strength. He commands us to be strong and courageous, to not be afraid or discouraged. And the thing about this is that when God commands us, when God is leading us and telling us to do something, he's always going to equip us and resource us to do it. And so you may not feel very strong right now in your life based on the circumstances that you are facing among many others. But God's heart for you is that you live with courage, and that you be strong, and that he resource and equip you to do that. And so over the next 4 days, I kind of want to talk to you about ways that I find strength in God, and hopefully that you can do the same in navigating through your difficult circumstances. And so today I want to talk about the very first way to discover and find strength in God, and it is this. It is own your weakness. Own your weakness. Now, I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive to find strength in God by leaning into or looking at or embracing the areas of your life where you don't feel strong enough. But we have a really good example in this, and that's the Apostle Paul. And the Apostle Paul writes about a weakness that he had in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. And this is what he says and how he talks about it. He says, 3 different times I begged the Lord to take it away. And each time he said, "My gracious favor is all you need. My power works best in your weakness." So then Paul continues and he says, "So now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may work through me. Since I know it's all for Christ's good, I'm quite content with my weaknesses and with insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Now, Paul went through a lot. I mean, he tells us in some of his other writings that he was shipwrecked, that he was tortured, that he was imprisoned, that he was stoned, not like stoned, but like someone threw rocks at him until they thought he was dead. The Apostle Paul went through a lot of really, really hard stuff. He had relationships that broke up over differing opinions. I mean, Paul had a lot of tough stuff that he walked through in life. And in looking at those things, and not only that, but like Paul begged God to take his weakness away. Paul begged God to help him in his overwhelming circumstance, to make life easier for him when he didn't think he could make it on his own. He begged God. But Paul realized this, and looking at the areas of weakness in his life and looking at the challenges and the struggles that he faced, that in all of those things, in God's refusal really to take away Paul's weakness, he realized that God was working through it the entire time. To the point where Paul says, "You know what? I'm thankful for my weaknesses. I lean into my weaknesses. I own them and I embrace them, because when I'm weak, God's strength is made perfect in my life." So really practically what that means is this, is that Paul's inability to overcome his circumstances, Paul's sense of being overwhelmed or struggling or facing challenges that he couldn't overcome, those didn't limit what God wanted to do in his life. And actually what he discovered was that when he felt that way, that God always carried him through. So you may be in a place in your life where you are just feeling like the mountains are too high and you can't see past them, and you don't know how you're going to make it through this. Maybe for you, the thorn in your side or the weakness that you're struggling with is loneliness. Right now, you're just really lonely. You feel alone and isolated. Maybe for you, it's financial. You are struggling and you can't seem to get your head above water when it comes to making ends meet. Maybe it's relational and you're really just struggling in some relationships that you have and there's just a lot of conflict and you're getting a lot of pushback from other people in your life and it just is making you really doubt your value and your worth. Maybe you are literally just facing the circumstances that are happening in our world today and you just are like, God, how in the world can this ever get any better? Well, when I'm facing situations and circumstances like this, I do my best not to lean into my own ability, my own knowledge, my own experience, but to lean on God's strength. Because I know this, I have limits. You may not know this about me. You may look at me and be like, wow, he is limitless. I mean, he could do anything. I'm going to surprise you that that's actually not true. I have limits that I can't overcome, and I need God to help me, and I lean into him when I'm at the end of my limits. And I would encourage you to do the same, because anytime that I'm feeling like what I'm facing is too much and I can't make it through, anytime that I'm feeling intense pressure to give up or to walk away because I just am not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not quick enough, I'm not able enough, I don't have enough, that usually means that I'm leaning on my own strength. And so I stop and I turn and I ask God to move in my weaknesses, and I just embrace them and I own them, and I recognize that they don't limit the God who created me and has a plan for my life. So I would just ask you, when you face it, pray like this. Say, God, I know that I'm weak. I know that I'm struggling, and I own it. I own that struggle. And I'm going to do everything I can, not to try and fix it on my own, but to find a way to surrender that weakness to you so that your strength can be made perfect. And as you pray that first step into finding God's strength, I trust that God is going to reveal himself and his strength to you in your life. So I'm praying for you, and I'll see you tomorrow with another tip on how to find strength in God.